A man in Geneva paid more for his watch than most people pay for a car. He wore it twice. Then the market turned. When he tried to sell it, the dealer who had spent 2 years telling him this watch was impossible to get, that the waitlist was closed, that he was lucky to even be considered, that same dealer offered him 40 cents on the dollar and suggested he take it, or wait for things to get worse. He waited. Things got worse. That story is not unusual right now. It is happening to collectors across Europe, across the United States, across the Gulf states, where watch spending was treated as a permanent one-way bet. The bubble that built itself between 2020 and 2022 on cheap money, on social media hype, on the very human fear of missing out, is unwinding in ways that are genuinely brutal for anyone who bought at the wrong moment. But the collapse is not uniform. That is what this video is actually about. While certain watches are down 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% from their peaks, a specific group of references has held its value, kept its buyers, and shown no signs of joining the sell-off. These are not the watches getting the headlines. They were never part of the frenzy to begin with, and that absence is now their greatest asset. 10 of them. Each one is holding for a different reason. Stay through to the end. The watch at number 1 is the answer almost nobody gives, and it is probably the most defensible purchase in the current market. Subscribe to support my channel. It would mean a lot to me. It helps more than you might realize. I also want to thank you all for watching my videos. I am really grateful for the community we are building here. Now let's dive into the list. Number 10, the Rolex Datejust 36 in two-tone Rolls-Or. Here is the thing about the Datejust 36 that the forums will never admit. They have been wrong about this watch for years. The consensus was that two-tone is tacky, that the Datejust is your grandfather's watch, and that anyone serious buys steel sport references. That consensus created a buying opportunity that has been sitting there in plain sight. Think about who actually buys a Datejust 36. Not a flipper. Not someone who read that Rolex was a good investment and opened a Chrono24 account. Someone who genuinely wants a 36mm watch with a Jubilee bracelet that works at dinner and at the weekend without a single second of overthinking. That buyer existed before the bubble and is still there now. The demand is real and it is steady, which means it never inflated into insanity, and it is not correcting into nothing. The two-tone Rolls-Or specifically sits at a gray market price that does not reflect how much more complicated it is to produce than a steel reference. The forum consensus called it unfashionable. The market priced it accordingly. For buyers who care about what a watch actually is rather than what Reddit thinks of it, that is the entry point. The two-tone aesthetic comes back around. It always does. Buying it when everyone thinks it is embarrassing is how value works. Number 9. The A. Lange and Sony Lange 1. Almost nobody in the bubble ever talked about the Lange 1, and that is exactly the point. The watches that crashed the hardest had one thing in common. They were famous with people who did not previously collect watches, who discovered the secondary market during lockdown, who bought because the chart was going up and because influencers were wearing them. The Lange 1 never had that problem. It is a German manufacturer watch that most people have never heard of. It requires genuine knowledge to appreciate, and it attracts buyers who are not going anywhere when sentiment shifts. The movement is assembled twice, built, tested, taken apart, and reassembled by hand to the finished standard. The outsized date display at 12 o'clock is a specific piece of horological engineering that took years to develop. Production is small because the process is genuinely slow, not because the marketing team decided scarcity was a strategy. When the bubble inflated, Lange prices moved modestly. When the correction hit, they moved modestly back. The collector base that has always owned these watches did not panic buy during the peak and is not panic selling now. That stability is the direct consequence of never having been adopted by the speculative layer of the market that is now in distress. Obscurity in this case turned out to be protection. Number 8. The Vacheron Constantin Overseas. The Overseas is genuinely one of the most underrated watches in the current market. The reason it is underrated is almost embarrassingly simple. It is not the Royal Oak or the Nautilus, and for the past 5 years that was the only thing that mattered. Both of those references rode the bubble to irrational premiums and are now experiencing corrections that have wiped out years of appreciation for buyers who got in at the wrong time. The Overseas sat next to them in the luxury tier, with comparable movement quality, comparable finishing, 300 years of manufacturer history behind the brand, and nobody wanted it because it was not the other two. That was their problem. Now it is the buyer's opportunity. The Overseas trades at a meaningful discount to both the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, despite being a comparable object by any honest measure. The buyers who are sitting on Royal Oak losses right now are doing exactly the math that this sentence implies. When that rotation happens at volume, the Overseas pricing moves. Getting in before it moves is the current window. Number 7. The Rolex Explorer 1, reference 124270. The Explorer 1 is the most sensible Rolex purchase in the current market, and it is not particularly close. It is available at or below retail from gray market sources. No waitlist, no purchasing history requirement, no authorized dealer relationship to cultivate over years. Just a 36mm steel Rolex with the current generation movement, a clean dial, and the same case and bracelet quality as every other reference in the lineup. Available right now at a rational price. The reason it never inflated is the reason it is not correcting. The speculative buyer class needed cultural visibility to justify the premium, like celebrity wrists, editorial features, and the sense that everyone wanted one. The Explorer 1 never generated that. It is a tool watch without the tool watch status. It is a Rolex without the Rolex mythology attached to it. And for a buyer who actually wants to wear a Rolex rather than own a piece of the frenzy, that makes it the most honest answer on the entire lineup right now. Number 6. FP Journe, any reference. The independent watch world operates on completely different logic from the Swiss luxury houses, and the bubble made that difference very visible. When premiums on Nautilus and Royal Oak references were going vertical, FP Journe watches moved modestly. The collector base did not suddenly expand because the chart looked good. It stayed the same, small, knowledgeable, long-term oriented. Flippers did not flood the Journe market because the watches were not accessible at volume, and the buyer base was not interested in momentum trading. The consequence is a secondary market that has not crashed, because it was not part of the mania in the first place. The entry price for a Journe is serious. Nothing here starts cheap. But for a buyer operating at that level who wants something that has demonstrated genuine immunity to the speculative cycle, the answer is sitting right there. Francois-Paul Journe produces fewer than 1,200 watches a year across all references. That is not a marketing number. That is a production constraint, and it produces a scarcity that is real rather than manufactured. Number 5. The Patek Philippe Calatrava, reference 5227. Everything that went wrong with the Nautilus, the frenzy, the irrational premiums, the devastating correction, happened because it became cool. Cool with people who had never previously owned a watch, people who bought because it was the thing to buy, people who pushed prices to levels that had nothing to do with the object. The Calatrava has never been cool in that way. It is a round dress watch, no integrated bracelet, no sport credentials, no celebrity endorsements. The generation of buyers driving the bubble looked at it and moved on to something flashier. That disinterest is now the most valuable thing about it. The Calatrava 5227 is a Patek Philippe, the finishing, the movement, the manufacturer standard, at a secondary market price that reflects genuine, steady demand from buyers who have always wanted a Patek dress watch. Those buyers did not disappear during the correction because they were never part of the frenzy. And the long-term case is compelling. The integrated bracelet sport watch cycle that dominated the last 10 years has peaked. The next generation of collectors is already starting to look at round dress watches. When that shift happens at scale, the Calatrava is one of the first references they reach for. Subscribe to support the channel if this breakdown is useful. Number 4. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo, reference 15202. The broader Royal Oak correction has been brutal. The model 15500 in steel came off its peak by over 40%. For most of the Royal Oak lineup, the era of guaranteed premiums is simply over. The Jumbo is a genuinely different conversation. This is the 39mm original, with a thinner case, a different movement, and the actual Genta design executed for current production in the size it was always meant to be worn. The collector base for the Jumbo is not the same as the collector base that drove the 15500 to insane premiums. It is older, more knowledgeable, less speculative, and it was buying the Jumbo for the right reasons before the bubble, and is still buying it for the right reasons after. The Jumbo did not fall as far as the rest of the lineup because its buyers were not going to sell into a panic they were not part of. The premium has compressed from its peak, but it has not evaporated because the demand behind it is based on what the watch actually is. That is a durable foundation. Number 3. The Rolex GMT-Master II Batman configuration, reference 126710. Yes, the premium has compressed. And yes, this still belongs on the list. The mistake people are making about the Batman right now is confusing compression with collapse. The watch is more accessible than it was 2 years ago. Dealers who would not talk to anyone without a purchase history are having more flexible conversations. That is compression. Collapse is what happened to the Nautilus. The Batman's premium is smaller, but it is supported by something the Nautilus premium never had: real production scarcity. The black and blue two-color ceramic bezel is genuinely difficult to produce. The manufacturing process that creates it limits how many can be made. When demand exceeds production at that constraint, the watch carries a premium. That constraint has not changed. What changed is that the speculative layer of the buyer pool exited when premiums compressed, leaving the remaining premium supported by buyers who actually want the watch. Buying a compressed premium on genuine scarcity is one of the cleaner opportunities the current market offers. Number 2. The Rolex Steel Daytona, reference 126500. The Daytona remains a singular watch in the market. Dealers are calling people now. That is a fact. The same dealers who had a 2-year waitlist and a purchasing history requirement are leaving voicemails offering immediate delivery. The premiums are smaller and the gray market is more accessible. None of that changes the fundamental demand picture. The Steel Daytona is the most liquid Rolex reference in the secondary market and has been through every market cycle. People who have genuinely wanted this watch for genuine reasons, the chronograph function, the 40mm case, the manufacture movement, have not stopped wanting it because the premium compressed. The waitlist at authorized dealers is real. The production constraint is real. The demand is durable. A compressed premium on a watch with genuine durable demand is an entry point. A compressed premium on a watch whose demand was purely speculative is a trap. The Daytona is the former. The buyers who understand that distinction are the ones acting right now. Number 1. The Rolex Datejust 41 in white gold. This is the answer that surprises people. And the surprise is the point. The white gold Datejust 41 was never caught up in the allocation conversation because it sits above the price tier where the allocation games happen. It is not a sport watch, so it was not part of the cultural frenzy that made Submariner and GMT references impossible to get without a 3-year relationship with a dealer. It is not steel, so it does not compete on the terms that generated all the headlines. What it is, and this is the part that gets overlooked, is one of the most honest luxury watch propositions available from Rolex. Solid 18-karat white gold case and bracelet. Fluted bezel in matching white gold. Current generation manufacture movement. The finishing on a white gold Rolex is categorically different from the steel references. The polished and brushed surfaces interact with light differently. The weight communicates the material immediately. This is not a watch pretending to be expensive. It is expensive and it shows. It did not inflate irrationally because it was never in the race. It does not need to recover from a correction because it did not participate in the bubble. It is available from authorized dealers from the gray market without the drama and without the premium at a price that reflects what the object actually is. While everyone was chasing steel sport references and paying 40% premiums to get them, this watch was sitting there being exactly what it is. That is the answer. And it is going to keep being the answer long after the correction conversation moves on to something else. 10 watches. The Datejust 36, because steady, real demand does not inflate and does not crash. The Lange one, because obscurity turned out to be armor. The Vacheron overseas, because being overlooked during the bubble means being correctly priced now. The Explorer one, because rational choices beat exciting ones when the market corrects. FP Journe, because genuine limited production is a different thing from manufactured scarcity. The Calatrava, because the next cycle's collectors are already looking this direction. The Jumbo, because knowing what you are buying is protection. The Batman, because compressed genuine scarcity is an accessible entry point. The Daytona, because real demand does not disappear when the speculators leave. And the white gold date, just 41, because it was never playing the game everyone else was losing. The bubble was a very expensive lesson in the difference between a watch people genuinely want and a watch people bought because everyone else was buying it. Those two things looked identical during the peak. They look very different now. If this kind of honest breakdown is useful, subscribing to the channel is the best way to support more of it.